The morning sun beat down merciless on Cold River, Wyoming, painting long shadows across the dusty main street. Jonas Hartley squinted against the glare as he tied his horse to the hitching post outside Morrison Bank and Trust. The year was 1884, and the small town hummed with the energy of cattle drives and railroad money. But beneath that prosperity lay currents as dangerous as any rattlesnake. Jonas had avoided this moment for weeks, but the notice in his pocket left no choice. The loan for his breeding stock was due, and Edward Morrison wasn't known for patience. Jonas brushed the trail dust from his worn leather vest and pushed through the heavy oak doors. The bank's interior offered blessed coolness, all polished wood and brass fixtures that spoke of Eastern money. Jonas removed his hat, running fingers through hair still damp with sweat. Behind the teller's cage, a thin man with spectacles glanced up nervously. Mr. Hartley," the teller stammered. "Mr. Morrison is expecting you. His office is—" "I know where it is." Jonas had been here before, back when old Morrison ran things fair and square. Edward Morrison was a different breed entirely. The office door stood ajar. Jonas knocked once and entered to find Morrison seated behind a massive desk, counting bills with practiced efficiency. The banker didn't look up. "Hartley, you're late." "Traffic on the trail." Jonas kept his voice level. "Had to help pull a wagon out of Willow Creek." Morrison's lips twitched in what might have been amusement or disdain. "How charitable, though charity won't pay your debts." Before Jonas could respond, the door opened behind him. He turned and felt the air leave his lungs. The woman who entered moved with the careful grace of someone always being watched. Her dress, though fashionable, seemed to constrict her movements. Auburn hair pinned severely back revealed a face of striking beauty, marred only by the coldness in her green eyes. Those eyes flickered over Jonas with the disinterest of someone viewing furniture. "Clara," Morrison said without warmth. "You remember Mr. Hartley? He owns that horse operation outside town." "Mrs. Morrison." Jonas nodded, noting how she flinched almost imperceptibly at her married name. "Mr. Hartley." Her voice carried the cultured tones of Eastern education. But something else lurked beneath a quality Jonas recognized from wild horses forced into harness. "My wife handles the bank's social correspondence," Morrison explained, though Jonas hadn't asked. She was just leaving. Clara's fingers tightened on the papers she carried. "Of course. Good day, Mr. Hartley." As she passed, their eyes met for an instant. In that brief moment, the ice in her gaze cracked, revealing something raw and desperate before freezing over again. Then she was gone, leaving only the faint scent of lavender and sadness. Morrison's voice cut through Jonas's thoughts. "Your loan, Hartley, $300 plus interest, due today." Jonas forced his attention back to business. "I have $200 here." He placed the leather pouch on the desk. "The rest within the month. The Army contract for remounts will—" The terms were clear: full payment or forfeiture of collateral. Morrison's smile reminded Jonas of a snake eyeing a mouse. "Though perhaps we could reach an accommodation." "What kind of accommodation?" "I hear you're quite skilled at breaking horses. I have a particularly spirited mare that needs attention. Succeed, and I'll extend your loan. Fail." Morrison shrugged eloquently. Jonas knew a trap when he heard one, but choices were scarce. "When?" "Saturday, the town social. Make it entertaining for my guests, and we have a deal." They shook hands, Morrison's grip cold as winter iron. Jonas left the bank with unease crawling up his spine. Though whether from Morrison's scheme or that glimpse behind Clara Morrison's mask, he couldn't say. The week passed in preparation. Jonas worked his horses, fixed fences, and tried not to think about green eyes that held secrets. Saturday arrived with unseasonable heat that had folks fanning themselves before noon. The Morrison estate sat on a rise overlooking town. All white columns and imported glass that seemed to mock the rough-hewn buildings below. Carriages lined the drive as Cold River's elite gathered for their monthly pretense at civilization. Jonas led his best saddle horse through the crowd of silk and broadcloth, feeling like a wolf among sheep. He found Morrison holding court near the paddock, Clara beside him in blue silk that made her skin seem porcelain pale. Hartley. Morrison's voice carried theatrical pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, our entertainment begins. The mare they brought out was magnificent, a black devil with eyes that promised murder. Jonas recognized the signs: ears pinned, muscles bunched. The trembling of an animal pushed past endurance. This wasn't wildness, but fear turned vicious. Gorgeous, isn't she? Morrison's hand rested possessively on Clara's waist. Jonas noticed how she stood rigid under the touch. Rather like breaking anything beautiful requires a firm hand. Someone in the crowd tittered nervously. Jonas stepped into the paddock, movement slow and deliberate. The mare exploded into motion, hooves striking sparks from the ground. For 20 minutes, Jonas worked with patience born of understanding. He didn't chase or rope, just moved with quiet authority, creating space and pressure in ancient rhythm. The crowd grew restless, expecting spectacle, but Jonas ignored them. This was between him and the mare. Gradually, the horse's panic ebbed. Ears flickered forward, then back. A tentative step, then another. When Jonas finally slipped the halter over her head, it was with the gentleness of a caress. Well, Morrison's voice cut sharp with disappointment. Rather anticlimactic. I expected more fight. Only a fool fights what doesn't need breaking. Jonas met Morrison's eyes steadily. Some things just need understanding. The banker's face darkened, but before he could respond, Clara spoke for the first time. How refreshing. Her tone matched winter frost, but Jonas caught something else underneath. To see strength without brutality. The crowd murmured approval, and Morrison's smile returned, though it didn't reach his eyes. Indeed. Well done, Hartley. We'll discuss your loan extension Monday. As Jonas led the mare away, he caught Clara watching him. For a heartbeat, her mask slipped again, revealing a longing so fierce it made his chest tight. Then Morrison's hand tightened on her arm, and she became ice once more. That night, Jonas sat on his porch, nursing whiskey and watching stars wheel overhead. He'd won Morrison's game, but victory tasted like ashes. The mare stood quiet in his corral, freed from one prison only to enter another. He wondered if Clara Morrison felt the same. The sound of hooves made him reach for his rifle, but the rider who emerged from darkness rode side saddle in a dark cloak. So, Mr. Hartley. Clara Morrison sat her horse with surprising skill. Forgive the intrusion. Jonas set down the rifle. Mrs. Morrison, does your husband know you're here? My husband knows what he chooses to know. She dismounted without assistance. I wanted to thank you for today. Just doing what I was paid to do. No, the word came fierce. Oh, you did what was right. That's rare. Up close, he could see the careful powder covering a bruise on her cheekbone. His hands clenched. You should go, he said roughly. This isn't proper. Proper? She laughed, bitter as alkali water. I've been proper my whole life. Proper daughter, proper wife, proper prisoner. I'm Mrs. Morrison. Clara. The name escaped like a confession. Just once, I'd like someone to call me Clara. The moonlight turned her face ethereal, but the pain in her eyes was earthly enough. Jonas knew he stood at a precipice. One step forward would change everything. You should still go, Clara. She smiled then, transforming her face. Yes, but first, one request. Teach me. Teach you what? To ride really ride, not this." She gestured at the side saddle. "To ride like you do, like I'm free." Jonas knew 20 reasons to refuse. Morrison's power, society's rules, his own scarred heart. But that fierce hope in her eyes undid him. "Sunday mornings," he heard himself say. "Early. There's a trail behind Miller's Canyon where no one goes." She mounted again, graceful despite the awkward saddle. "Thank you, Jonas." His name on her lips was a dangerous music. He watched her ride away, knowing he'd just lit a fuse that would either illuminate or destroy them both. The stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to human folly. Jonas poured another whiskey and prepared for a sleepless night, haunted by green eyes and the certainty that Cold River would never be the same. The first Sunday morning arrived wrapped in mist that clung to the canyon walls like secrets. Jonas had been awake since before dawn, second-guessing his promise, teaching Edward Morrison's wife to ride what manner of fool's errand had he agreed to. He saddled 2 horses, choosing his gentlest mare for Clara. The trail behind Miller's Canyon lay empty as promised, far from town gossips and prying eyes. Still, Jonas kept glancing over his shoulder as if Morrison himself might materialize from the sagebrush. The sound of approaching hooves made him tense, but it was Clara who emerged from the mist, wearing a plain riding skirt and blouse that looked borrowed from someone half her station. Her hair, usually pinned tight, hung in a simple braid. She looked younger, almost vulnerable. "I wasn't certain you'd come," she said, dismounting from her side saddle mount. "Gave my word." Jonas studied her face, noting shadows under her eyes. "You sure about this, your husband?" "Is in Cheyenne until Tuesday. Banking business." Her chin lifted. "I'm tired of being afraid of my own shadow. Mr. Hartley." "Jonas," he corrected. "If we're breaking rules, might as well break them proper." That earned him a smile, quick and genuine. "Very well, Jonas." He showed her the mare, explaining the differences between side saddle and riding astride. Clara listened with intense focus, asking questions that showed quick intelligence. When it came time to mount, she hesitated only a moment before swinging up with surprising grace. "I used to watch the stable boys when I was young," she confessed, adjusting her posture as he instructed, before Father decided it was unladylike. They started slow, walking the horses along the canyon floor. Jonas watched her closely, correcting her grip, her balance. She was a natural, moving with the horse instead of fighting it. Within an hour, they were trotting, Clara's face alight with joy he suspected she rarely showed. "It's like flying," she breathed, reining in beside him. "All these years, and I never knew." "Most things worth knowing ain't taught in parlors," Jonas said. Her expression sobered. "No, they're not." She studied him with those penetrating green eyes. "You weren't always a horse trainer, were you? You sit that saddle like cavalry." Jonas tensed. That was a long time ago. The war. After 7th Cavalry, out of Fort Lincoln. The memories pressed close smoke and screams and orders he'd refused to follow. Left in 76. Clara's eyes widened. "Little Bighorn?" "Week before. Got court-martialed for insubordination. Wouldn't." He stopped, jaw tight. "Wouldn't follow orders to burn out a peaceful village. Women and children." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the horse's breathing. Then Clara reached over, her gloved hand briefly touching his. "You did the right thing. Cost me everything. Career, reputation, the woman I was engaged to." He laughed bitterly. "Senator's daughter couldn't marry a disgraced soldier." "Then she didn't deserve you." The fierce certainty in Clara's voice surprised them both. She colored slightly but didn't look away. "Some prices are worth paying." They rode in companionable silence after that. Following the trail as it wound higher into the hills, Jonas found himself stealing glances at her. this banker's wife who wore her prison so elegantly. She caught him looking once and smiled, a real smile that transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. "Tell me," she said, as they paused to water the horses at a small spring. "How did you end up in Cold River?" "Drifted for a while after the discharge. Worked cattle drives. Broke horses for whoever'd pay. Came here 3 years back when old Morrison Edwards' father offered to stake me for the horse operation." Jonas's mouth twisted. Different kind of man than his son. "Yes." Clara's voice went flat. "Samuel Morrison had integrity. Edward has ambition. That's why you married him." The question hung in the air like gun smoke. Clara's hand stilled on her horse's neck. "I was 22, she said finally. Father had lost everything in the panic of 73. Edward offered to save him from bankruptcy. All it cost was me. Jonas felt anger rise hot in his throat. "Your father sold you." "Oh, nothing so crude." Her laugh was brittle. "I was simply made to understand my duty. Good daughters sacrifice for family, and Edward can be charming when it suits his purposes. I thought perhaps..." "Perhaps what?" "Perhaps I could learn to love him, or at least find contentment." She turned away. "I was young, foolish." Jonas wanted to reach for her, but didn't trust himself. "You weren't foolish. You were trapped." "Still am." She mounted again with fluid grace. "But for a few hours on Sunday mornings, maybe I can pretend otherwise." They rode back as the sun climbed higher, both aware that their stolen time was ending. At the canyon mouth, Clara paused. "Same time next week. If you're sure." "I've never been more sure of anything." She met his eyes squarely. "This is the first time in 5 years I've felt alive." After she left, Jonas sat his horse a long time, watching dust settle in her wake. He'd meant to keep things simple, just riding lessons. But nothing about Clara Morrison was simple, and the line he'd sworn not to cross was already blurring. The week passed with painful slowness. Jonas went through the motions training horses, mending tack, avoiding town as much as possible. But his thoughts kept returning to Sunday morning, to green eyes bright with freedom. He encountered Edward Morrison once, outside the mercantile. The banker's smile was sharp as a skinning knife. "Hartley, I trust that mare is working out." "She's coming along." "Good, good. Gentle her too much, though, and she loses what makes her valuable." Morrison's pale eyes glinted. "True of all females. Wouldn't you say they need a firm hand?" Jonas kept his expression neutral through sheer will. "I find most creatures respond better to understanding than force." "How progressive." Morrison's tone dripped contempt. "Well, some of us prefer more traditional methods. Good day, Hartley." Jonas watched him go. Hands clenched. He'd known men like Morrison in the army, ones who confused fear with respect, control with strength. The thought of Clara under such a man's power made his gut twist. Sunday came again, and with it Clara, dressed once more in her borrowed clothes. This time she brought something else, a smile that reached her eyes. "I've been practicing," she announced. "Watch." She mounted smoothly and put the mare through her paces with growing confidence. Jonas found himself grinning as she whooped with delight during a successful canter. "You're a natural," he told her when she finally reined in, breathless and glowing. "Another month, and you'll outride half the men in town." "Only half," she mock-pouted, then grew serious. "Jonas, I need to tell you something. About Edward." His gut tightened. "He knows." "No, at least, I don't believe so. But he's involved in something. Late-night meetings with rough men. Papers he locks away. I think..." She hesitated. "I think he's using the bank to fund something illegal." "That's a dangerous accusation." "I know, but people trust that bank with their life savings. If Edward's risking it for some scheme..." She shook her head. "I can't prove anything. He keeps me well away from bank business." Jonas studied her troubled face. "Why tell me?" Because you're the only honest man I know in this town. She colored slightly. And because if something happens to me, someone should know the truth. Nothing's going to happen to you. The words came out harder than intended. Not while I'm around. Clara's eyes widened at his vehemence. For a moment, the air between them crackled with unspoken possibilities. Then she looked away. We should ride before it gets too hot. They spent the morning exploring new trails, Clara growing bolder with each mile. She laughed freely now, a sound Jonas was beginning to crave like whiskey. When they stopped for lunch by a shaded creek, she produced biscuits and jam from her saddlebags. Mrs. Henley's recipe, she said, spreading a blanket on the grass. She thinks I've taken up early morning prayer meetings, and she believed that. Mrs. Henley believes what she's paid to believe. Clara's smile turned wry. Edward ensures our servants are well compensated for their discretion. They ate in comfortable silence, watching clouds build over the distant mountains. Clara had removed her gloves, and Jonas found himself noticing her hands elegant but strong, with calluses forming where the reins rubbed. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly. Jonas nodded. "That woman, the senator's daughter? Did you love her?" The question caught him off guard. "Thought I did. Looking back, maybe I loved the idea of her more than the reality. She was beautiful, educated, everything a cavalry officer should want." He picked up a stone, skipped it across the creek. "Never once looked at me the way you looked at that hawk circling earlier, like she wanted to sprout wings and join it." Clara's breath caught. "Is that how I looked?" "Like you belonged to the sky instead of the ground." He met her eyes. "Like you were meant for freedom." The moment stretched taut between them. Clara's hand moved slightly on the blanket, toward his but not quite touching. Jonas felt the pull like gravity, dangerous and undeniable. A gunshot cracked across the valley, shattering the spell. Both jerked upright as riders appeared on the ridge, rough men Jonas recognized as Garrison's crew, hired guns who worked the shadowy edges of legal. "Stay behind me," Jonas ordered, hand going to his Colt. But the riders passed without stopping, heading toward town. Still, their appearance had broken the afternoon's peace. Clara began packing with hands that trembled slightly. "I should go. If Edward returns early." "Clara," Jonas caught her arm gently. "Whatever he's involved in, you don't have to face it alone." She looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. "Don't make promises you can't keep. Jonas, we both know what Edward is capable of." "I've faced worse than Edward Morrison." "Have you?" Her smile was sad. "You've faced enemies in battle, but this is different. This is the kind of war where they destroy you slowly, legally, with paper and influence, where fighting back makes you the villain." She pulled away, gathering her horse's reins. But at the last moment, she turned back. "These mornings, they're saving me." "You're saving me." "But please, be careful. If Edward discovers what he'd consider a betrayal, let me worry about Morrison." "I can't help but worry." The words slipped out, soft and revealing. Clara's cheeks flamed, and she mounted quickly. "Next Sunday." "I'll be here." He watched her ride away, back straight despite the weight she carried. Jonas knew he was walking into quicksand, that every moment with Clara pulled him deeper, but like a drowning man who'd glimpsed sunlight, he couldn't stop reaching for her. The storm clouds that had been building all afternoon finally broke as he headed home. Rain washing the land clean, but some stains, Jonas knew, went too deep for any storm to cleanse. And whatever Edward Morrison was planning in those late-night meetings, whatever darkness Clara had glimpsed, Jonas had a feeling Cold River was about to learn just how deep those stains could go. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm as steady as heartbeat. Sunday mornings became sacred territory, carved out of time and duty. Clara arrived each week with growing confidence, her borrowed clothes now fitting her like a second skin. The woman who'd once moved like a caged bird now flew across the landscape with fierce joy. Jonas taught her everything: how to read the weather in cloud formations, track deer through buffalo grass, find water by watching birds. She absorbed it all with hungry intelligence, asking questions that made him think, laughing at his dry observations about townfolk. "You're wasted in that mansion," he told her one morning as she successfully calmed a spooked horse. "Should have been born to the frontier." "Perhaps I was," Clara replied, stroking the mare's neck. "Just took a while to find my way here." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither acknowledged. They'd grown careful about touching, about looking too long, as if naming what sparked between them might ignite a fire they couldn't control. On a particularly hot Sunday in late July, Jonas led her to a hidden spot he'd discovered years back, a deep pool fed by a cold spring, surrounded by cottonwoods. Clara's eyes widened with delight. "It's beautiful," she breathed, "like a secret the earth kept just for us." "Thought you might want to rest the horses," Jonas said, trying to ignore how "us" sounded on her lips. "Water's cold enough to refresh, but not so cold it'll shock." Clara dismounted, walking to the pool's edge. She knelt, trailing her fingers through the clear water. "I used to swim in the lake behind our estate in Connecticut, before Mother decided it was unladylike." "Seems like a lot of things got decided for you." She stood, turning to face him with that direct gaze he'd come to crave. "Yes, they did, but I'm deciding now." Before Jonas could respond, she sat on a fallen log and began unlacing her boots. He turned away quickly, focusing on unsaddling the horses. "I won't look," he said roughly. "You can swim if you want. I'll keep watch." He heard splashing, her gasp at the cold, then silence. After a moment, her voice came soft and wondering. "Jonas, you have to see this." He turned reluctantly. Clara stood waist-deep in the pool, still fully clothed in a riding outfit, water darkening the fabric. She was watching a pair of deer that had emerged from the trees, drinking delicately from the pool's far edge. "Don't move," Jonas whispered, but she already knew. They stood frozen, watching the wild creatures who watched them back with liquid eyes. Time stretched like taffy until the deer finally bounded away, white tails flashing. Clara laughed with pure delight. "Did you see how they looked at us, like we were the curiosities? To them, we are." Jonas found himself moving closer to the water's edge. "Most creatures know to avoid humans, but not you." She waded toward him, water streaming from her clothes. "You don't avoid anything. Do you not corrupt bankers, not wild horses, not even foolish women who drag you into their troubles? You're not foolish." "No." She stood before him now, water pooling at her feet. "Then what am I?" "Brave," he wanted to say. "Beautiful. Mine." But the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he pulled off his vest and handed it to her. "Cold," he managed. "You'll catch your death." She took the vest, their fingers brushing. "Always looking after me," she murmured. "No one's ever—" "Clara," her name came out raw. "We should—" "I know." She stepped back, wrapping his vest around her shoulders. "I know what we should do. What's proper, safe, but I'm so tired of should." "Jonas, aren't you—" He was, God help him, he was tired of keeping his distance, of pretending she was just another student learning to ride. But he also knew the price of wanting what belonged to another man, especially a man like Edward Morrison. "Your husband gets back tomorrow," he said instead of answering. Clara's face shuddered. "Yes, the cage door closes again." She moved to where her boots waited, all the light gone from her eyes. "Perhaps it's time to end these lessons. Before—" "Before what?" She looked at him over her shoulder. "Before I do something that can't be undone, before I forget who I'm supposed to be and remember only who I am with you." Jonas felt the words like a physical blow. "Is that what you want to stop coming?" "What I want," Clara laughed, but it was bitter as alkali. "What I want doesn't matter. It never has." "It matters to me." The words fell between them like stones in still water. Clara went very still, his vest slipping from her shoulders. "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't say things like that. I'm not strong enough to hear them and still go back to that house, to that life." Jonas closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough to see the pulse beating fast in her throat. "Then be stronger. You're the strongest woman I know. Clara Morrison. You just don't know it yet." Tears filled her eyes but didn't fall. "Strength, is that what you call it when I count the minutes until Sunday, when I lie beside my husband and dream of canyon trails and spring water, when I watch you gentle a horse and wish?" "Wish what?" She lifted her chin, meeting his eyes with desperate courage. "Wish you could gentle me the same way. Wish I could stop being afraid long enough to let you." The air between them crackled. Jonas's hands clenched at his sides, fighting the urge to pull her close. One touch, he knew, and they'd both be lost. A gunshot echoed across the canyon, then another. Jonas spun, hand going to his Colt. Riders appeared on the ridge, the same rough crew they'd seen before, but this time moving fast, pursued by what looked like a sheriff's posse. "Get down," Jonas ordered, pulling Clara behind the cottonwoods. The chase thundered past, horses lathered with sweat, men shouting. Jonas recognized Sheriff Watson in the lead, his deputy beside him. Whatever Morrison's hired guns had been up to, it seemed the law had finally taken notice. They waited until the dust settled and silence returned. Clara was shivering despite the heat, her wet clothes clinging. Jonas retrieved a blanket from his saddlebag, wrapping it around her. "Those men," she said quietly, "they meet with Edward sometimes, late at night. You need to be careful." Jonas said urgently, "If Morrison's mixed up in something and it goes bad." "I'll be fine. Edward's too clever to leave evidence connecting him." She pulled the blanket tighter. "He's always been good at letting others take the fall." They rode back mostly in silence, both shaken by what they'd almost said. Almost done. At the canyon mouth, Clara handed back his vest. "I meant what I said earlier," she told him, "about ending these lessons. It's getting too complicated." Jonas felt something tear inside his chest. "If that's what you want." "We've established what I want doesn't matter." She tried to smile but failed. "Goodbye. Jonas, thank you for everything." She was gone before he could respond, leaving him with nothing but the memory of wet fabric clinging to her skin and words that couldn't be taken back. 3 days passed. Jonas threw himself into work, breaking a new string of horses with single-minded focus, but every sunset found him staring toward town, wondering if Clara was safe, if Morrison suspected anything, if she missed their mornings as fiercely as he did. On Thursday, a knock at his door after dark made him reach for his rifle. But it was Tom Henley, the Morrisons' groomsman, hat in hand and worry etched deep in his weathered face. "Mr. Hartley, sorry to bother you, but it's about Mrs. Morrison." Jonas's blood chilled. "What about her?" "She's asking for you, sir. She's hurt bad. Mr. Morrison's gone to Laramie on business, and she won't let us fetch the doctor. Says she'll only see you." Jonas was already reaching for his coat. "Where?" "The old Garrett place, 2 miles north. She'll explain everything. She said, but please hurry." Jonas saddled his fastest horse, mind racing. The Garrett place had been abandoned for years, a casualty of drought and failed dreams. Why would Clara be there? How badly was she hurt? He found her horse tied outside the dilapidated cabin, favoring its left foreleg. Inside, A single lantern cast dancing shadows. Clara sat on a dusty bench, cradling her right arm, her face pale but composed. "You came," she said simply. "Tom said you were hurt bad." Jonas knelt before her, gently examining her arm. Bruised, possibly sprained, but not broken. "What happened?" "I was riding, alone. Foolish, I know." She wouldn't meet his eyes. "The horse spooked at a snake, and I fell." Jonas knew horses and knew falls. The bruises on her arm were too precise, too deliberate. They looked like fingerprints. "Clara," his voice came out dangerous. "Did he do this?" She finally looked at him, and he saw the truth in her eyes before she spoke. "He knows about Sunday mornings. Not everything, just that I've been riding. One of his men saw me returning last week." Rage rose in Jonas's throat, hot and choking. "I'll kill him." "No." Clara caught his hand with her good one. "That's what he wants, an excuse to destroy you. He's already suggested you've been taking liberties, that you've corrupted me with your influence. But the sheriff is Edward's cousin." Clara's laugh was hollow. "Justice in Cold River flows from the bank. Jonas, you know that." He did know. It was why men like Morrison thrived while honest folks struggled. But knowing didn't make the rage easier to swallow. "Then we leave," he said suddenly. "Tonight. Pack what you need and we'll go California, Oregon, anywhere he can't reach." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "And live as what, your mistress? A fallen woman who abandoned her marriage vows. As my wife. We'll find a judge somewhere." "Jonas." She pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. "I'm already married. That means something, even if the marriage itself is a mockery. I can't what choose happiness, choose freedom." He gripped her shoulders gently. "You said you were tired of should. So am I. Run with me, Clara. Choose yourself for once." She was crying now, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. God, how I want to, but I'm terrified. Not of Edward, not of scandal, but of hoping, of believing I could have what we glimpse on Sunday mornings." Jonas pulled her against him carefully, mindful of her injured arm. She came willingly, burying her face in his shoulder. He stroked her hair, feeling her tremble. "I won't let him hurt you again," he murmured. "One way or another, I swear it." She pulled back to look at him, eyes fierce despite the tears. "Promise me something. If I find the courage to leave, to choose us, you won't let me go back, no matter how scared I get, how much I doubt. Promise you'll help me be brave." "I promise." He sealed it with a kiss to her forehead. Nothing more, though every fiber of his being screamed for deeper connection. "When you're ready, I'll be waiting." They stayed there another hour, Clara teaching him to wrap her arm properly, talking of inconsequential things while the weight of consequential decisions pressed around them. When she finally rose to leave, she moved like a woman walking to her own execution. "Edward returns tomorrow night," she said at the door. "There's to be a party Saturday, a celebration of some business deal. I'll be expected to play hostess, to smile and charm his associates." Her mouth twisted. "If you see bruises, then you'll know my performance wasn't convincing enough." "Clara." "No more. Jonas, I can't bear it tonight." She touched his face once, briefly. "Whatever happens, remember that Sunday mornings were real. The only real thing I've known in years." Then she was gone, swallowed by darkness, leaving Jonas with the echo of promises and the terrible certainty that their fragile world was about to shatter. He stood in the doorway of the abandoned cabin, watching her lantern fade to nothing, and wondered if courage would find them both before it was too late. Saturday arrived cloaked in deceptive sunshine, the kind of clear day that made Cold River seem almost civilized. Jonas had spent 2 sleepless nights wrestling with promises and possibilities. But as evening approached, he found himself cleaning his best clothes and trimming his beard. He hadn't been invited to Morrison's party. Of course, men like him didn't merit invitations to banker soirees. But the Riverside Hotel's saloon overlooked the Morrison estate, and a man could nurse a whiskey while keeping watch. The town's elite arrived in their finery as shadows lengthened. Jonas recognized most Judge Garrett with his perpetual scowl, the railroad executives who'd grown fat on government contracts, Mayor Hutchins, who'd never met a bribe he couldn't rationalize. They climbed the mansion steps like crows gathering at a feast. Through the grand windows, Jonas caught glimpses of Clara playing hostess, even from a distance. He could see the careful way she moved, protecting her injured arm while maintaining perfect poise. She wore deep burgundy that made her skin glow like porcelain, every inch the banker's wife. Quite a gathering, observed Samuel Chen, the hotel owner, refilling Jonas's glass. Morrison's been crowing about some new venture all week. Any idea what kind? The kind that makes rich men richer, I expect. Chen's expression was carefully neutral, a survival skill for a Chinese businessman in a town that barely tolerated his presence. Though I hear tell it involves our friends from south of the border. Jonas's jaw tightened. The rough crew that ran with Morrison had connections to Mexican cattle rustlers, men who asked no questions about brands or bills of sale. If Morrison was financing stolen livestock, a commotion outside drew his attention. Clara had stepped onto the veranda, and in the lamplight, Jonas saw what she'd tried to hide with powder and careful styling. A bruise shadowed her left cheekbone. Another darkened her throat where high collar couldn't quite conceal it. His glass shattered in his grip. "Easy there," Chen murmured, producing a bar towel. "Breaking my glassware won't help her." Jonas looked at him sharply. Chen's expression remained placid, but understanding flickered in his dark eyes. "She buys tea from my wife," Chen said quietly. "Real tea, not the swill most folks drink. Comes in when she needs respite. My wife notices things. Bruises, tears." He paused. A woman shouldn't have to pay such prices. Before Jonas could respond, the saloon doors banged open. Jake Garrison swaggered in, Morrison's chief enforcer, all scar tissue and mean. His clothes showed trail dust, and satisfaction oozed from every pore. "Whiskey," he bellowed. "The good stuff. We're celebrating tonight, boys." His crew followed 5 hard cases who'd sell their mothers for silver. They commandeered a table, already half drunk on success and cruelty. "Pulled it off slick as you please," one bragged. "100 head of prime Mexican beef, trail brand so muddy nobody can prove nothing." "Morrison's gonna make us all rich," another agreed. "Long as that puffed-up sheriff cousin of his keeps looking the other way." Jonas memorized every word, every face. So Morrison was financing rustling operations, using the bank to launder profits. How many honest ranchers would lose everything while Morrison grew fat on stolen cattle? He left money on the bar and slipped out, mind racing. The party was still in full swing, light spilling from every window. As he watched, Clara appeared again, this time helping an elderly woman to a carriage. For just a moment, their eyes met across the distance. Jonas saw desperation there, and something else resolution, perhaps, or farewell. The next morning brought no Clara to Miller's Canyon. Jonas waited until the sun stood at noon, hope dying with each empty hour. When he finally returned home, he found a note wedged in his door, written in Clara's precise hand. "Edward knows about the canyon. It's not safe. Please don't try to see me. Forget what I asked of you. Some cages can't be opened without destroying what's inside." Jonas crumpled the paper, fury and frustration warring in his chest. How could he forget the way she flew across the prairie? The light in her eyes when she mastered a new skill. The tremor in her voice when she'd asked him to help her be brave. He saddled his horse with grim purpose. If Morrison thought fear would keep Jonas away, he'd misjudged his man. But as he neared town, Tom Henley intercepted him on the road, face grave. Turn back, Mr. Hartley. Morrison's got men watching for you. He's spreading word you've been taking liberties with Mrs. Morrison, that you've confused her with wild ideas. And people believe that. Tom's silence was answer enough. In a town where Morrison controlled the money, truth bent to his will like everything else. She needs help, Jonas said flatly. What she needs is for you to stay away before Morrison decides you're too much trouble to leave breathing. Tom lowered his voice. My Sarah, she works in the house, says Mrs. Morrison hasn't left her room in 2 days. Won't eat, barely speaks, like her spirits finally broke. The words hit Jonas like fists. He'd seen that in soldiers' men who'd endured too much finally shattering like overtaxed steel. But this was Clara, who'd found joy in simple freedoms, who'd asked him to help her be brave. There's something else. Tom continued reluctantly. Morrison's planning something for tomorrow night, meeting with those Mexican connections at the old mine shaft. Sarah overheard him telling Mrs. Morrison she'd be coming along insurance. He called it. Jonas's blood chilled. Taking Clara to a criminal meeting meant Morrison either trusted her broken compliance or planned to use her as leverage. Neither option boded well. What time? Mr. Hartley, you can't. What time? Tom. The older man sighed. Midnight, but it's a trap. Sure as sunrise. Morrison wants you to come after her. Maybe so, but Jonas had walked into traps before, and sometimes the only way out was through. He thanked Tom and turned his horse toward home, plans already forming. Morrison thought he held all the cards: wealth, influence, Clara. But he'd forgotten one thing: a man with nothing left to lose was the most dangerous kind. That night, Jonas prepared methodically. Rifle cleaned and loaded. Extra ammunition. Knife sharp enough to split whispers. He wrote a letter to Judge Carter in Cheyenne, one of the few honest lawmen left in the territory, detailing Morrison's rustling operation. If things went bad, at least the truth would survive. As Monday crawled toward midnight, he made his way to the abandoned Josephine mine. The shaft had been played out a decade ago, leaving only darkness and memories of dead dreams. Perfect for the kind of business that couldn't bear daylight. Jonas found a vantage point among the rocks above. Settling into wait, the moon rose thin and sharp as a blade, casting everything in silver and shadow. Just before midnight, riders appeared. Morrison's crew first, then a group of hard-looking men he didn't recognize, Mexican vaqueros, armed and wary. Last came Morrison's carriage, incongruous in this rough setting. The banker emerged first, dressed for business despite the hour. Then he reached back, pulling Clara out with unnecessary force. She wore a dark traveling dress, her face pale as bone in the moonlight. Morrison kept one hand locked on her arm as he greeted his associates, displaying her like a trophy or a threat. Jonas couldn't hear words from his position, but he read the body language clear enough: predators circling, establishing dominance. The meeting progressed with much gesturing and examination of papers. Money changed hands. Morrison's banknotes for Mexican gold, all very civilized for blood money. Then Morrison made a mistake. He released Clara's arm to sign something. Attention focused on business. She took a single step back, then another, edging toward the darkness beyond the lantern light. One of the Mexicans noticed, barking a warning. Morrison spun, face contorting with rage. He backhanded Clara casually, sending her sprawling. The crack echoed off the rocks like a gunshot. Jonas was moving before conscious thought kicked in. He came down the slope like an avalanche, rifle spitting fire. His first shot took Morrison's gun from his holster. The second sent the Mexicans diving for cover. "Nobody move," Jonas roared, rifle sweeping the group. "First man who twitches gets a third eye." Morrison's face went from shock to calculation to cruel amusement. Hartley. How predictable. The lovesick fool rushing to save his lady fair. "Let her go. Morrison." Let her go, the banker laughed. She's my wife, my property. You've already trespassed enough. Clara had pushed herself to her knees, blood trickling from a split lip. Her eyes found Jonas, wide with fear, but not for herself. For him. Rather public for a lovers' meeting, wouldn't you say? Morrison continued conversationally. All these witnesses to your assault on legitimate businessmen, though I suppose we could settle this privately, man to man. He was reaching for something a hidden derringer, Jonas guessed, but Clara saw it too, with desperate strength. She lunged, knocking Morrison off balance. The little gun went off, bullet whining past Jonas's ear. Then everything happened at once. The Mexicans went for their guns. Morrison's men scattered for cover. Jonas dove, rolling, came up firing. He put 2 men down before a rifle butt caught him from behind, sending him sprawling. Through dimming vision, he saw Clara fighting like a wildcat, all pretense of submission gone. She clawed at Morrison's face, drawing blood, until Garrison grabbed her from behind. Enough! Morrison's voice cracked with fury. He'd lost his civilized veneer entirely, revealing the monster beneath. You want to act like a savage, I'll treat you like one. He drew his hand back for another blow, but Clara met his eyes without flinching. I'm not afraid of you anymore, she said clearly. Do your worst, Edward, but I'll never be your property again. The words seemed to break something in Morrison. His face went purple, then white. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. No, you won't. He turned to Garrison. Take them both to the shaft. Lovers want to be together. They can spend eternity in the dark. Jonas struggled against the hands holding him, but there were too many. They dragged him toward the mine's gaping mouth, Clara fighting every step beside him. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was her face, fierce and unafraid, finally free even in captivity. Then something cracked against his skull, and the world went away, leaving only the echo of Clara's voice. I'm not afraid anymore. Consciousness returned slowly, bringing pain and the taste of copper. Jonas found himself in complete darkness, the air thick with dust and the smell of old earth. His hands were bound behind him, head throbbing where Garrison's rifle had connected. But he was alive, which meant Morrison had plans beyond simple execution. Jonas! Clara's voice came from nearby, tight with controlled fear. Are you awake? I'm here. He struggled to sit up, orienting himself by sound. They were deep in the mine shaft, far from any natural light. Are you hurt? Nothing new, a rustling as she moved closer. They tied us and threw us down here. Edward said they'd make it look like an accident. Lovers fleeing together, tragic cave-in. Jonas tested his bonds rope, competently tied but not impossible. How long was I out? An hour, maybe 2. They left one guard at the entrance. I can hear him moving sometimes. Her voice was steady, but Jonas heard the tremor beneath. Being buried alive was a hard death, slow and terrifying. Trust Morrison to choose cruelty over efficiency. Clara, listen to me. He kept his voice calm, commanding. We're getting out of here. But first, can you move closer, back to back? These knots need work. She scooted over, their shoulders touching. Despite everything, her presence steadied him. They worked in darkness, fingers fumbling with rough rope. Clara's breath catching when the bonds rubbed her already bruised wrists. I'm sorry, she whispered. This is my fault. If I hadn't been weak, hadn't needed. Stop! Jonas's voice came out harder than intended. You're the strongest woman I know. You stood up to him, fought back. That's not weakness. But you're here because of me. Going to die because... Nobody's dying tonight except maybe Morrison when I get my hands on him. He felt a knot give slightly. Tell me something. When you said you weren't afraid anymore, did you mean it? A pause. Yes, for the first time in my life. I meant it. When I saw him strike you, something broke, or maybe something finally came together." Her voice grew stronger. "All those Sundays, learning to ride, to be free, I understood. Fear only has the power we give it." "That's my girl." The words slipped out before Jonas could stop them. Clara went still. Then, soft as a prayer, "Am I your girl?" Jonas's hands stilled on the ropes. In the darkness, with death waiting patient as stone, there was no room for pretense. "You've been mine since that first morning in the canyon," he said roughly. "Maybe before. Maybe from the moment you looked at me in that bank like you were drowning and I was air." "Jonas." "Let me finish. I've been a coward, hiding behind propriety and circumstances. But if we're dying tonight, you should know. I love you. Clara Morrison. Not as another man's wife. Not as some fantasy of rescue. You, the woman who laughs at hawks and fights like a wildcat and makes terrible biscuits but tries anyway." "My biscuits aren't that bad," she protested, but he heard tears in her voice. "They're awful. Like hardtack, but worse." He felt another knot loosen. "And I'd eat them every morning for the rest of my life if it meant watching you make them." Clara made a sound between laughter and sobbing. "I love you too, desperately, completely, with every broken piece of my heart." The rope finally gave way. Jonas's hands came free, and he immediately turned to work on Clara's bonds. In the darkness, his fingers found her face, tracing tears. "No crying," he murmured. "We've got work to do." "These are happy tears," she insisted. "A woman's allowed happy tears when the man she loves finally stops being noble and admits he loves her back." He freed her hands, and she immediately threw her arms around his neck. For a moment, they simply held each other, hearts beating in shared rhythm. Then Jonas pulled back. "We need light. Check your pockets. Anything useful?" They searched by touch. Clara had hairpins, a handkerchief. Jonas found his knife. Garrison had been sloppy, missing the boot sheath, but no matches, no lantern. "Wait." Clara's voice brightened. "The walls. In mines. They sometimes store supplies in wall niches. If we search—" They separated, feeling along the rough stone. Jonas's hands found timber supports, loose rock, the occasional rusted tool. Then, "Here," Clara called. "I found something." Jonas made his way to her voice. Her hands guided his to a wooden box tucked into a natural shelf. Inside candles, matches wrapped in oilcloth, even a battered lantern. "Miners always cache supplies," Clara explained as Jonas struck a match. "I read about it in one of those adventure novels Edward hates." Light bloomed, revealing their prison. The shaft stretched back into darkness, timber-supported walls showing their age. But the passage forward, toward the entrance, was clear. "One guard," Jonas mused. "Armed, but probably not expecting trouble from inside." He tested the weight of a rusted pickaxe handle. "I'll need to get close." "We'll need to get close," Clara corrected. "I'm not hiding while you fight." He started to protest, saw the steel in her eyes, and nodded. They made their way forward carefully. Clara holding the light while Jonas led with his makeshift weapon. The passage curved, and voices drifted back more than one guard. "Don't see why we can't just shoot them," someone complained. "Because Morrison wants it to look natural," Garrison's gravelly voice replied. "Cave in at dawn. Bodies found tragic-like, cleaner than bullets. Still think we should have kept the woman. Waste of good." "You want to tell Morrison his wife's too good for dying?" Garrison interrupted. "Man's particular about his property, even property he's done with." Jonas felt Clara tense behind him. He touched her hand steady. "Love, we're getting through this." They crept closer. Around the final bend, Jonas could see firelight. 3 men, not one Garrison and 2 others, passing a bottle while they waited for dawn. The mine entrance lay beyond, stars visible through the opening. Jonas calculated odds. 3 armed men, him with a pickaxe handle and a knife. Clara with hairpins and courage. Not good. But waiting meant dawn and a manufactured cave-in. No choice. Then Clara whispered, "The support beam." He followed her gaze. The timber nearest the guards was rotted, held more by habit than strength. A few good hits. "When it falls, we run." He breathed. "No heroics. Straight for the horses." She nodded. Jonas positioned himself, drew back the pickaxe handle, and swung with all his strength. The crack echoed like thunder. Wood splintered, showering the guards with debris. Garrison spun, gun coming up, but Jonas was already swinging again. The beam gave way with a groan. Rock and timber cascaded down. Not a full collapse, but enough chaos. Jonas grabbed Clara's hand. "Now!" They burst from the passage, dodging falling debris. One guard went down under a timber. Garrison dove clear, cursing. The third man got off a shot that whined past Jonas's ear. Then they were through, into blessed night air. The horses waited where Morrison's men had left them, still saddled. Jonas boosted Clara onto the nearest mount, swung up behind her. "Stop them!" Garrison roared, emerging from the dust. Gunfire erupted. Jonas bent low over Clara, spurring the horse to desperate speed. They thundered into darkness, shots fading behind them. But Jonas knew pursuit would come swift and deadly. Morrison wouldn't tolerate their escape. "Where?" Clara gasped. Jonas had already decided. The old Hartley cabin, up on Medicine Ridge. Defensible position, and I've got supplies cached. They rode hard through the night, pushing the horse to its limits. Dawn was breaking as they reached the cabin. A sturdy structure Jonas's father had built in better days. He'd maintained it as a hunting retreat, stocking it against emergencies. Like now, Clara slid from the saddle, exhausted but uncomplaining. Jonas secured the horse and guided her inside, immediately checking sight lines and ammunition. "They'll come," Clara said. It wasn't a question. "Let them." Jonas loaded his rifle with steady hands. "This is good ground. My father held off claim jumpers here for 3 days once." And then the cavalry arrived. He met her eyes. "But we won't have cavalry." Clara moved to him, framing his face with her hands. "We have each other. That's enough." He kissed her then, pouring everything into it: love, fear, promise, desperation. She responded with equal fervor, and for a moment the world narrowed to just them, 2 souls finding each other in the wreckage of their lives. When they broke apart, Clara's eyes were bright with tears and determination. "Whatever happens, I regret nothing. These past months, knowing you, loving you, it's worth any price." "The price isn't paid yet," Jonas said grimly. "And I intend to make Morrison pay it, not us." He positioned Clara at a window with a rifle, showing her the basics. She learned quick as always, steady despite everything. As the sun climbed higher, they waited, watching the approaches. "Jonas," Clara said softly, "that thing you said in the mine, about the rest of your life." He glanced over. "Yeah, I'm holding you to it. When this is over, I want those mornings, all of them, even with my terrible biscuits." "Especially with your terrible biscuits," he corrected, and was rewarded with her smile, bright and fierce and absolutely worth fighting for. Dust on the horizon announced their visitors. Jonas counted riders 6, maybe 7. Morrison himself rode in the center, face carved from stone. They stopped just outside rifle range, regrouping. "Quite the romantic setting," Morrison called out, voice carrying clear in morning air. "The cabin where you've been meeting all along. I suppose. How many times did you bring my wife here?" "Hardly." "Only bringing her here now," Jonas called back. "And she's not your wife anymore. She's her own woman. The law says different. Your law, your cousin's law, not justice. Morrison laughed, ugly and sharp. Justice from a cashiered soldier and an adulteress, you're both going to hang. But I'm generous. Send Clara out, and I'll make your death quick. Go to hell, Clara shouted, surprising everyone. I'd rather die free than live one more day as your property. Morrison's face darkened. So be it. He made a gesture. His men spread out, beginning their advance. Jonas squeezed Clara's shoulder. Once be brave. My love then sighted down his rifle. The morning exploded in gunfire. Jonas fired, levered, fired again with mechanical precision. Clara's rifle cracked beside him, her aim improving with each shot. Morrison's men scattered for cover, but the cabin's position gave defenders the advantage. For now. Jonas, Clara pointed. They're trying to flank us. He saw two men creeping around the side, using the woodpile for cover. Jonas shifted position, but they'd learned caution. This would be a siege, not a rush. Time stretched. The sun climbed. Ammunition ran low. Jonas knew the mathematics of their situation, but his face showed only calm determination. If this was their last stand, they'd make it count. Then Clara touched his arm. Listen. Hoofbeats. Many of them, approaching fast. Jonas risked a look and felt his heart leap. Riders in blue, actual cavalry, guidons snapping in the wind. And at their head, Captain Morrison, Jonas breathed. James Morrison, Edward's younger brother. The one member of the family with integrity. He'd been posted at Fort Laramie, but somehow... Stand down, Captain Morrison commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. All of you, weapons down. This is federal business now. Edward Morrison's face went white. James, what are you doing here? My duty. The captain dismounted, hand on his service revolver. Had an interesting visitor yesterday. Judge Carter from Cheyenne. Seems someone sent him evidence of rustling operations funded through Morrison Bank. Federal crime. Brother, out of your cousin's jurisdiction. Jonas lowered his rifle, scarcely believing. In the doorway, Clara gripped his hand. You can't prove anything, Edward blustered. Can't I? Captain Morrison pulled out a familiar ledger. Your Mexican partners were quite talkative when faced with federal charges. And Mrs. Morrison here provided Judge Carter with some very interesting documents before she left town. Clara gasped. How did you... Sarah Henley, the captain said with a slight smile. She felt her employer needed to know his wife had been copying certain papers. For insurance, she said. Edward's composure finally cracked entirely. He went for his gun, desperation overriding sense. Jonas moved without thinking, shoving Clara behind him. Two shots cracked almost simultaneously. Edward Morrison crumpled, his brother's aim true. Jonas felt fire across his ribs a graze, painful but not fatal. Then Clara was there, hands checking his wound, tears streaming. Don't you dare die on me, Jonas Hartley. Not now, not when we're finally free. Not dying, he assured her, though speaking hurt. Too stubborn, you're stuck with me. Good. She kissed him fierce and quick. Because I meant what I said. I want all those mornings. Captain Morrison approached, face grave but not unkind. Mrs. Morrison Clara, the marriage can be annulled, given the circumstances. Coercion, fraud, adultery on Edward's part with those saloon women. You're free. Free. The word hung in the air like a benediction. Clara looked at Jonas, and he saw his whole future in her eyes. Not easy, maybe, but theirs to build. Ma'am, the captain cleared his throat. We'll need statements, but after that... After that, Clara said firmly. I'm going to marry this impossible man and make terrible biscuits for the rest of our lives. Jonas laughed despite the pain in his side. That's my girl. And she was, finally, truly, completely his, as he was hers. The sun climbed higher, warming the land, and somewhere a hawk circled, wild and free as the love they'd found in the ruins of their cages. The dust hadn't settled from the confrontation at Medicine Ridge when the real battle began, not with guns, but with consequences rippling through Cold River like stones in still water. Jonas's wound, though minor, required attention. Clara tended him with steady hands while Captain Morrison's men secured the scene and gathered evidence. "Hold still," Clara murmured, cleaning the graze across his ribs. "You're worse than a green horse." "Horses don't have beautiful women fussing over them," Jonas replied, trying to lighten her obvious distress. "This one does." But her attempt at levity couldn't mask the shadows in her eyes. They both knew the gunfire was only the beginning. Captain Morrison proved efficient and thorough. Within hours, he'd documented everything: the rustling operation, the Mexican connections, the money laundering through Morrison Bank. Edward's body was wrapped and loaded onto a wagon with surprising gentleness. "He was still my brother," the captain said quietly, catching Jonas's look. "Whatever he became, once he was just James, who taught me to ride and snuck me penny candy." Clara touched the captain's arm. "I'm sorry, James, for everything." "Don't be. Edward made his choices long ago." His expression hardened. "But there will be questions in town, investigations. The bank's assets will be frozen pending federal review." "What about the depositors?" Clara asked. "The ordinary people who trusted their savings to that bank. Protected by federal intervention, though there may be delays." Captain Morrison studied her. "You'll need to return to Cold River, both of you. There'll be hearings, testimonies required." Jonas felt Clara tense beside him. Returning to town meant facing the whispers, the judgment, the social guillotine that awaited a woman who defied convention. "We'll face it together," he said firmly. But even he wasn't prepared for the reception that awaited them. Word traveled faster than horses in a small town, and by the time they rode down Main Street, it seemed every soul in Cold River had gathered to watch. Some faces showed sympathy, others curiosity, but most reflected the hard judgment of those who preferred their scandals at a safe distance. "Jezebel," someone muttered as Clara passed. "Ought to be ashamed," came another voice. "Driving a man to such extremes." Jonas's jaw clenched, but Clara sat straighter in her saddle, chin high. She'd learned to ride through worse storms than gossip. They took rooms at Chen's hotel, separate ones, to minimize scandal, though the damage was already done. Sarah Henley appeared within the hour, tears streaming. "Oh, Mrs. Morrison, Clara. I'm so sorry. I tried to keep the house running, but the federal men sealed everything. Your clothes, your books, everything's locked away." "It doesn't matter," Clara assured her. "You saved our lives by getting those documents to Judge Carter. I can never repay that." "You were kind to me," Sarah said simply. "First person in that house to treat me like a human being instead of furniture. That's payment enough." The next days blurred together in a haze of legal procedures. Judge Carter arrived from Cheyenne, a stern man with eyes that missed nothing. He interviewed Jonas and Clara separately, then together, building the case that would either free them or hang them. "Your testimony is crucial," he told Clara during one session. "But I must warn you, Morrison had friends, powerful men who won't appreciate their arrangements being exposed. You're sure you want to proceed?" "I've been silent too long," Clara replied. "Yes, I'm sure." The hearings were held in the town courthouse, packed to capacity with curious townspeople. Clara testified for hours, detailing Edward's business dealings, his connections to criminals, the systematic fraud that had enriched him at others' expense. She spoke clearly, without drama, but Jonas saw the toll each word took. When the prosecutor asked about her relationship with Jonas, the courtroom went silent as a held breath. "Mr. Hartley taught me to ride," Clara said simply. In doing so, he taught me to be free. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty. But I won't apologize for choosing courage over complicity." The phrase rippled through the crowd, choosing courage over complicity. Jonas saw some women nodding, recognition in their eyes. How many of them lived in cages of their own, gilded or otherwise? His own testimony was shorter, but no less damaging to Morrison's reputation. He detailed the rustling operation, the meeting at the mine, Morrison's attempt to murder them both. When asked about his feelings for Clara, he met the judge's eyes directly. "I love her, loved her while she was married, love her now that she's free. If that makes me a sinner in this town's eyes, so be it. But I've seen what passed for morality in Edward Morrison's world, and I'll take honest sin over hypocritical virtue any day." Garrison tried to flee town but was caught at the county line. His testimony, given in exchange for a lighter sentence, confirmed everything Jonas and Clara had said. The Mexican rustlers, already in federal custody, provided the final nails in the coffin of Morrison's empire. But victory in court didn't translate to acceptance in society. Clara found herself persona non grata among the town's respectable women. Shops that had eagerly sought her patronage now found reasons to close when she approached. The church she'd attended for 5 years suggested she might be more comfortable worshiping elsewhere. "Let me take you away from here," Jonas urged one evening as they walked along the river path, one of the few places they could meet without causing fresh scandal. California, Oregon, anywhere but here. Clara stopped, turning to face him. In the setting sun, her face showed the strain of the past weeks, but also a new strength. "No," she said firmly. "I won't run. These people, this town, they need to see that a woman can choose her own path and survive. If I flee, I confirm their worst beliefs. But if I stay, rebuild, live honestly, maybe I help the next woman who needs to choose courage." Jonas pulled her close, marveling at her strength. "You know I'll stand with you." "I know." She rested her head against his chest. "But there's something else. The federal receiver says Morrison Bank can reopen under new management. They need someone with knowledge of the books, the accounts. They've asked me to help." Jonas pulled back to study her face. "You want to run the bank?" "Help run it. Ensure people get their money back. Make it what Samuel Morrison intended, a place that serves the community, not exploits it." Her eyes blazed with purpose. "Edward used that bank to control this town. Maybe I can use it to free them." "The town that's shunning you." "The town that's afraid," Clara corrected. "Fear makes people cruel, but fear can be overcome. We proved that." Jonas kissed her forehead. "When you put it that way, how can I argue?" The next morning brought unexpected support. Samuel Chen appeared at Clara's hotel room with his wife, Lynn, a woman rarely seen in public. "Mrs. Morrison," Lynn said in careful English, "my husband tells me you need clothing. Since your belongings are sealed, I have some pieces that might suit." Clara's eyes filled with tears at the kindness. "Thank you, but I couldn't." "You could and you will," Lynn said firmly. "We understand being outsiders, but outsiders together are less alone." "Yes." More surprises followed. Dr. Martinez, who'd faced his own share of prejudice, offered his services when Jonas's wound grew infected. Tom and Sarah Henley risked their own reputations to help Clara set up a small household in a rented cottage. Even some of the working men, who'd suffered under Morrison's predatory loans, tipped their hats when she passed. The town began to divide, not cleanly, but noticeably. The established elite closed ranks against Clara, but others saw her differently. She'd stood up to power and survived. For women trapped in their own difficult marriages, for men crushed by debt, for anyone who'd felt the boot of the powerful on their necks. Clara Morrison became something unexpected hope. The gunfight everyone expected came on a Tuesday afternoon. 3 of Morrison's former associates, furious at the loss of their profitable arrangements, decided to solve their problems with lead. They caught Jonas alone at his horse ranch, figuring him for easy prey without Clara to protect. They figured wrong. Jonas had survived the Indian Wars and Edward Morrison's schemes. 3 thugs with more greed than skill posed little challenge. When the smoke cleared, 2 lay dead and 1 fled with a bullet in his shoulder, spreading word that Jonas Hartley was not a man to cross. But the real gunfight came later, in the courthouse. As Clara fought to reopen the bank, Morrison's creditors wanted liquidation. His former partners wanted the whole matter buried. The town council, led by Mayor Hutchins, wanted the scandal to simply disappear. Clara faced them all with steady composure, armed with ledgers and law instead of guns. "This bank holds the savings of over 300 families," she stated. "Farmers, ranchers, shopkeepers, people who trusted an institution, not a man. They deserve better than liquidation at 10 cents on the dollar." "And what makes you think a woman can run a bank?" Hutchins demanded. "Especially a woman of your reputation." Clara's smile could have cut glass. "My reputation, you mean, as someone who exposed corruption, who risked everything for truth. That reputation." "You know what I mean," Hutchins blustered. "I do indeed. You mean my reputation as a woman who refused to be property, who chose love over convention, who fought back instead of submitting." Clara stood, addressing the room at large. "If that reputation disqualifies me from handling money, what does your reputation qualify you for? Mr. Mayor, you who took bribes from my late husband, you who looked the other way while he robbed this town blind." The room erupted. Accusations flew, old grudges surfaced. But when the dust settled, the federal receiver's decision stood. Clara Morrison would help manage the bank's reorganization, supervised by federal oversight. That night, Jonas found her at the cemetery, standing before a stone marked "Samuel Morrison, honest man, loving father." "I think he would have approved," she said softly. "Of the bank decision?" "Of all of it. He told me once that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but action in spite of it." She turned to Jonas. "I was so afraid for so long. Afraid of Edward, of scandal, of losing myself entirely, but you showed me something different." "What's that?" "That love and freedom are worth any battle." She moved into his arms. "Jonas, the annulment will be final next month. I know we should wait. Let the scandal die down. But nothing." Jonas interrupted. "I've waited long enough. Marry me. Clara. Not next month. Not when the town approves. Tomorrow. Let them gossip over their teacups while we build a life." Clara laughed, the sound bright as morning. "Yes, though I warn you, my biscuits haven't improved." "I'll risk it." They married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the edge of town. Judge Carter officiated, the Chens and Henleys witnessed, and if the respectable folk of Cold River noticed, they kept their distance. But Jonas saw faces in windows, watching, some disapproving, but others curious, even wistful. The real violence came that night. Jonas had expected it when men like Morrison fall. They leave power vacuums that nature and ambition abhor. Jake Garrison, out on bail and nursing grudges, gathered the remnants of Morrison's gang for one last play. They struck at midnight, torches and guns, figuring to burn out the newlyweds and reclaim their territory through terror. But Jonas had learned hard lessons about preparedness. When Garrison's men approached the ranch, they found not sleeping victims but ready rifles. The battle was brief and decisive. Jonas and his hastily assembled allies, Tom Henley, Dr. Martinez, even Samuel Chen, fought with the fury of men protecting more than property. They fought for the idea that Cold River could be different, better, free from the shadow of corruption. When Sheriff Watson finally arrived, late as always, he found Garrison dead and his gang scattered or captured. The threat to Jonas and Clara ended with finality, but the threat to Cold River's old order had just begun. In the weeks that followed, the town transformed slowly, painfully, like a broken bone resetting. The bank reopened under Clara's partial management, and farmers who'd faced foreclosure found reasonable terms. Women who'd never spoken above whispers began attending Clara's informal gatherings, discussing everything from business to books to the radical notion that they might have minds worth engaging. Jonas expanded his horse operation, training mounts for the cavalry, but also teaching young people to ride boys and girls alike, to the scandal of traditionalists. His classes became Clara's, spreading the freedom of horseback to a new generation. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sun paint the mountains gold, Clara said, "We did it." Did what? Survived. More than survived. We're building something new. She smiled at him. Though I sometimes wonder what would have happened if you just paid your loan that day and never looked twice at the banker's cold wife. Jonas pulled her close. You were never cold, just frozen. And I'd have found you somehow, some way. Some things are meant to be. Romantic nonsense, Clara teased, but her kiss said otherwise. In the distance, thunder rumbled over the mountains, not the violence of men this time, but nature's promise of rain for the thirsty land. Jonas and Clara sat together, no longer hunter and hunted, no longer scandal and shame, but simply two people who'd chosen courage over complicity, love over law, freedom over fear. The storm that broke over Cold River that night washed the streets clean, and if some citizens grumbled that the old ways were better, others lifted their faces to the rain and smiled. Change had come to Cold River, brought by a banker's wife who pretended cold until love taught her to burn bright as prairie fire. And in a cottage at the edge of town, that fire burned still, warming two hearts that had found in each other not just passion, but purpose, the purpose of living authentic lives in a world that preferred comfortable lies. They'd paid in blood and tears for that authenticity. But, as Clara had said, some prices were worth paying. The future stretched before them, uncertain but theirs to shape, and shape it they would, one sunrise at a time, one act of courage at a time, until Cold River itself learned the lesson Clara had taught that freedom, once tasted, could never again be traded for the cold comfort of a cage. The aftermath of violence settled over Cold River like ash from a distant fire. In the pale morning light, Jonas surveyed the damage to his ranch, bullet holes in the barn walls, scorched earth where torches had fallen, the lingering smell of gunpowder. But they had survived, and Garrison's gang was finished. The question now was what came next. Clara emerged from the house carrying coffee, her face showing the strain of the night's battle, but also fierce determination. She'd fought alongside him, proving again that the banker's cold wife had always been a fiction. The Martinezes are safe, she reported. Tom's taking them supplies, and Samuel Chen sent word no casualties among our people. Our people? Jonas liked the sound of that. In standing against Garrison, they'd forged something new, a coalition of outcasts and honest folk who'd chosen sides in the battle for Cold River's soul. What about the town council? He asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. Emergency meeting this afternoon. Clara's mouth twisted. Mayor Hutchins is calling for martial law. Says we've turned Cold River into a battlefield. We didn't turn it into anything. We just stopped pretending it wasn't one. Before Clara could respond, riders appeared on the horizon. Jonas reached for his rifle, then relaxed as he recognized Captain Morrison's cavalry unit. The captain himself rode in front, face grim beneath his campaign hat. Jonas, Clara, he dismounted, surveying the damage. I heard about last night, came as soon as I could. Bit late for the festivities, Jonas said dryly. Maybe not. Captain Morrison's expression darkened. Garrison's dead, but the corruption goes deeper. I've been investigating my brother's connections. There's a whole network, judges, territorial officials, even some military contractors. They won't let this go easily. Clara stepped forward. Then we expose them all. With what evidence, Edward kept most of it in his head or in coded ledgers. The captain paused. Unless... Unless what? Jonas prompted. There's a safety deposit box in Denver. Edward mentioned it once when he was drunk, said it was his insurance policy. Captain Morrison met their eyes. If we could get to it. That's a 3-day ride through hostile territory, Jonas pointed out. And we don't even know what's in it. I know. Clara's voice was quiet but certain. Edward showed me once, trying to frighten me into compliance. Names, dates, amounts every bribe, every deal, every official he owned. He called it his kingdom in a box. The men exchanged glances. Such evidence could clean out corruption for 100 miles. It could also make them targets for every crooked official in the territory. I'll go, Jonas decided. Take a few good men. We'll go, Clara corrected. I know exactly what to look for, and I have legal standing as Edward's widow to access his property. Clara, it's too dangerous. Everything we've done has been dangerous. Her chin lifted in that way he'd come to recognize. I won't hide while you risk yourself for my battle. Captain Morrison cleared his throat. I can provide military escort part of the way, but you'll need to move fast. Word's already spreading about Garrison. The rats will be looking to destroy evidence. They left that evening, a small party moving swift and quiet. Jonas, Clara, Tom Henley, and 2 of Captain Morrison's most trusted soldiers. The captain himself had to maintain appearances, but his men were Solid Sergeant McBride, a grizzled veteran, and Corporal Santos, young but sharp-eyed. The first day passed without incident. They made good time across the open prairie, Clara riding astride with growing confidence. But as they climbed into the foothills, Jonas's instincts prickled. They were being watched. Company, McBride muttered, scanning the ridgeline. Been shadowing us for an hour. How many? Jonas asked. Hard to say. They're good, whoever they are. They made camp that night in a defensible position, a ring of rocks with clear sight lines. Clara helped with the horses, moving with quiet efficiency. The shared danger had stripped away any pretense between them. They moved as partners, anticipating each other's needs. Can't help but think, Tom said as they ate cold biscuits. Year ago, Mrs. Morrison wouldn't have dreamed of camping rough like this. A year ago, Mrs. Morrison was sleepwalking, Clara replied. Sometimes it takes nearly dying to start living. The attack came at dawn, swift and professional. Not Garrison's rabble, but hired killers who knew their business. Jonas had posted Santos on watch, and the young corporal's warning shot gave them seconds to prepare. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions. Jonas pushed Clara behind a boulder and returned fire, picking his targets. These weren't town thugs. They moved with military precision, laying down covering fire while others advanced. They're trying to flank us, McBride shouted, swinging his rifle toward movement on the left. Jonas saw it too, a coordinated assault designed to pin them while others circled. But they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed Clara would be a liability, cowering while the men fought. Instead, she'd grabbed Tom's spare rifle and taken position at a gap in their defenses. Her first shot went wide, but the second found its mark, dropping an attacker who'd gotten too close. The surprise of effective fire from an unexpected quarter disrupted their rhythm. That's my girl, Jonas muttered, then louder. Santos, take Tom and hit their horses. They won't follow on foot. It was brutal mathematics strand the attackers, and they'd have to give up pursuit. Santos and Tom slipped away, while Jonas, Clara, and McBride held the line. The tide turned when the attackers' horses scattered, courtesy of Santos's marksmanship. Suddenly, the hunters faced a long walk home through hostile territory. Their leader, a thin man with dead eyes, called the retreat. This isn't over, he shouted. You can't fight the whole system. Watch us, Clara called back, and Jonas heard steel in her voice that would have made any cavalry officer proud. They pushed hard the rest of the day, knowing more trouble would come. Denver appeared at sunset, a sprawling city that dwarfed Cold River. Jonas had been here during his army days, but Clara guided them now, remembering Edward's trips. The First National Bank of Denver was a fortress of marble and iron, designed to impress and intimidate. Clara walked in like she owned it, Jonas and McBride flanking her while the others watched the horses. Mrs. Morrison to access her late husband's safety deposit box, she announced to the clerk, producing documents Judge Carter had prepared. The clerk, a nervous man with thinning hair, examined the papers carefully. "I'll need to verify." "By all means." Clara's smile was razor sharp. "I'm sure the federal marshals investigating my husband's illegal activities will be fascinated by any delays in accessing potential evidence." The box appeared with remarkable speed after that. In a private room, Clara opened Edward's kingdom. Jonas whistled low at the contents ledgers. Contracts. Correspondence that implicated half the territory's power structure in Morrison's web of corruption. "Look at this," Clara breathed, holding up a letter. The territorial governor himself, taking bribes to award railroad contracts, and here the federal judge in Laramie paid to look the other way on rustling cases. "This is dynamite," McBride said. "No wonder they wanted us dead." They copied what they could, Clara's neat hand racing across pages. But time was against them. The bank would close, and their pursuers wouldn't be far behind. "We need to get this to Judge Carter," Jonas decided. "He's the only clean authority I trust." "He's in Cheyenne," Clara said. 2 days' ride." "Then we'd better get started." They left Denver as shadows lengthened, the evidence distributed among them in case they were separated. Jonas noticed Clara tucking documents inside her corset with practical efficiency. "Planning to shoot your way out with paper bullets," he teased, trying to lighten the mood. "If necessary." But she smiled, and for a moment they were just Jonas and Clara, stealing a moment of connection amid chaos. The pursuit caught them at Willow Creek, the same water Jonas had mentioned in that first meeting at the bank. How far they'd come since then, from wary strangers to partners in the deepest sense. This time it wasn't hired guns, but official force, a marshal's posse, badges gleaming with authority. "Stand down," the lead marshal called. "You're under arrest for theft of private property." "Whose property?" Clara demanded. "I'm Edward Morrison's legal widow." "Judge Blackwood says otherwise. Says you're a conspirator in your husband's crimes, trying to destroy evidence." Blackwood, one of the names in Edward's documents. The web was moving to protect itself. "You know what?" Jonas said conversationally to McBride. "I'm getting real tired of corrupt lawmen." The sergeant grinned. "Funny thing about federal military authority, supersedes local marshals when national security's involved." He produced his own papers. Captain Morrison had thought of everything. "This evidence pertains to corruption affecting military contracts. Any interference is an attack on the United States Army." The marshals hesitated. Federal authority was one thing they couldn't simply shoot their way past. Their leader, though, wasn't ready to give up. "You can't hide behind the military forever, and accidents happen on long rides." "They do," Jonas agreed. Like the accident where 6 federal marshals tried to suppress evidence of corruption and ran into a cavalry patrol. He pointed to the ridge, where blue uniforms had appeared, Captain Morrison's reinforcements, arriving with perfect timing. The marshals calculated odds and didn't like the math. "This isn't over," their leader snarled. But they withdrew. Captain Morrison himself rode down to meet them. "Thought you might need help. Amazing how fast bad news travels." "How did you know where to find us?" Clara asked. "Santos is resourceful. He slipped away last night with a message." The captain's expression grew serious. "We need to move. Half the territory's mobilizing to stop that evidence from reaching honest hands." They rode through the night, a larger force now, but still vulnerable. Dawn found them holed up in an abandoned way station. Horses blown, everyone exhausted. Clara dozed against Jonas's shoulder, and he marveled at her resilience. The pampered banker's wife had become a warrior. "Riders coming," Santos reported from his lookout. Lots of them. Jonas felt Clara tense beside him. They were outnumbered 3-1, and exhaustion would tell in a fight. But as the dust cloud resolved into individual riders, he recognized the lead figure. Judge Carter. Clara breathed. How? The judge rode in with a full complement of federal marshals, real ones with legitimate authority. His craggy face showed satisfaction as he dismounted. Mrs. Hartley, he said, using her new name deliberately. I heard you had something for me. The relief was overwhelming. Clara produced the documents with hands that shook slightly, and Jonas saw tears in her eyes as Carter examined them. This will do. The judge said simply, This will do very nicely. By tonight, warrants will be issued from here to Santa Fe. What about Cold River? Clara asked. The people there who stood with us will be protected. You have my word. Carter's expression softened. You've done a brave thing. Both of you. Dangerous, but brave. Just trying to clean up our home, Jonas said. And maybe you have. The judge mounted again. I suggest you lay low for a few days. Let us lawyers handle the cleanup. Then go home and build the life you've earned. As the federal forces departed with the evidence, Jonas and Clara stood together in the morning light. They were dirty, exhausted, marked by violence and loss, but they were free. I love you, Clara said suddenly. I don't think I've said it enough. Through all this madness, I love you. Jonas pulled her close. You've shown it every day, in your courage, your faith, your refusal to give up. That's worth more than words. Still, she looked up at him. I want the words too. I want everything the words, the touches, the quiet mornings and dangerous midnights. All of it. Greedy woman, he murmured, kissing her. Good thing I've got a lifetime to give. They turned their horses toward home as the sun climbed higher. Behind them lay the wreckage of Morrison's empire and the promise of justice. Ahead waited Cold River, changed and changing still. The town they returned to 3 days later buzzed with news of arrests and revelations. Mayor Hutchins had fled in the night. Several council members found themselves explaining their sudden wealth to federal investigators. The old power structure was crumbling like ancient adobe in rain. But at Jonas and Clara's ranch, none of that mattered as much as the simple pleasure of being home. They unsaddled their horses together, moving with the harmony of long practice. So, Clara said as they walked toward their house, what now? We've fought corruption, survived assassins, toppled kingdoms. What does normal life even look like? Jonas considered. Horses, banking, maybe some of those terrible biscuits you keep threatening. They're improving, Clara protested. Sarah's been teaching me. Thank God for Sarah. He caught her hand. But seriously, what do you want now that you're free to choose? Clara stopped, looking out over the land they'd fought to protect. I want to help rebuild Cold River into what it should be, a place where women have voices, where honesty matters more than wealth, where people like the Chens and Martinezes are neighbors, not outsiders. That's a tall order. Yes. She smiled at him, bright and fierce. Good thing I have help, a certain horse trainer who's surprisingly good at fighting for justice. Just a simple man who fell in love with a banker's wife, Jonas corrected. Not anymore. Clara moved into his arms. Now I'm a rancher's wife, a banker in my own right, a woman who chose her life instead of accepting it. As they stood there, survivors of their own war, the future stretched before them, not easy, perhaps, but theirs to shape. Cold River would resist change, would test their resolve. There would be setbacks and small betrayals, moments of doubt and days of struggle. But there would also be mornings on horseback, watching hawks circle in endless sky. Evenings on the porch, planning a future neither could have imagined a year ago. The satisfaction of seeing their example inspire others to choose courage over complicity. The banker's wife, who'd pretended cold, had found her fire, and in finding it, had lit a beacon for others trapped in their own cages. The transformation was complete, yet in another sense, just beginning. Because real revolution doesn't end with gunfire and arrests. It continues in daily choices, in small acts of courage, in the steady work of building something better from the rubble of what was. And Jonas and Clara Hartley were ready for that work, together. 6 months had passed since the fall of Morrison's empire, and Cold River bore little resemblance to the town it had been. The old bank building, once a monument to greed, now housed the Cold River Community Bank with Clara as its managing partner. Jonas watched from across the street as she emerged for lunch, still marveling at the transformation both hers and the town's. Some Mrs. Hartley. A young woman hurried up to Clara, clutching a worn ledger. The loan papers came through. We can save the farm. Clara's smile lit her whole face. That's wonderful. Margaret, remember, Tuesday payments, and if the harvest comes up short, we'll work something out. The kind of flexibility Edward Morrison would have scorned was rebuilding Cold River one family at a time. Jonas crossed the dusty street to meet his wife, noting how naturally she moved now, no longer constrained by the armor of propriety. Busy morning, he asked, taking her arm. 3 new business loans approved, 2 farms saved from foreclosure, and Mrs. Chen is teaching me to keep proper books in both English and Chinese. Clara's eyes danced. Who knew banking could be about building instead of breaking? They walked toward Chen's restaurant, where Lynn's cooking had become the informal heart of the new Cold River. Inside, a mix of faces that would have been unthinkable a year ago. White ranchers sharing tables with Mexican vaqueros. The black cavalry soldiers from Fort Laramie welcomed alongside everyone else. Jonas, Clara, Doctor. Martinez waved them over. Join us. We're planning the Harvest Festival. As they settled at the table, Jonas noticed a familiar figure at the bar, Captain Morrison, out of uniform, staring into a whiskey glass. The captain had resigned his commission after the trials, unable to reconcile military service with the stain of his family name. Clara noticed too. Without hesitation, she rose and approached him. James, you shouldn't drink alone. The captain looked up with hollowed eyes. Shouldn't drink with the woman who exposed my brother either. People talk. Let them. Clara's voice was gentle but firm. You chose justice over blood. That takes a courage I understand. Join us. For a moment, Jonas thought the captain would refuse. Then something in his shoulders eased, and he brought his glass to their table. The conversation resumed carefully, planning celebrations while navigating around painful history. We need something for the children. Sarah Henley suggested. She and Tom had opened a small school, teaching reading to anyone who wanted to learn. A race, perhaps. Riding lessons. Clara said suddenly, Jonas could teach basics. Get the young ones started right. Since when do proper young ladies need riding lessons? The voice came sharp from the doorway. Mrs. Prudence Blackwood, wife of the arrested judge, stood rigid with disapproval. Behind her clustered several other women, remnants of the old social order. The restaurant went quiet. This confrontation had been brewing for months. Since they decided to be more than property, Clara replied evenly. You're welcome to join us. Prudence, the festival is for everyone. For everyone, Mrs. Blackwood's laugh was bitter. For whores and criminals and race traders, you mean you've destroyed everything decent about this town? No, Jonas said quietly. We destroyed everything corrupt. There's a difference. You would say that. Prudence's gaze raked over him. A failed soldier who seduced another man's wife. And you, she turned on Clara, parading around in men's clothes, running a business like you're equal to your betters. You're an abomination. Clara stood slowly, and Jonas saw the old ice in her eyes, but different now, protective rather than hiding. I'm a woman who chose freedom over cages. If that makes me an abomination in your eyes, I'll wear the title proudly. You'll wear worse than that when decent people take this town back. Prudence hissed. This isn't over. We know what you are, what you've done. Your kind doesn't belong here. My kind. Clara's voice could have cut steel. You mean the kind who stood up while you cowered, who fought while you counted your husband's bribe money. That kind. Prudence's face went purple, but before she could respond, Lin Chen stepped forward. Her English was accented but clear. You leave now. This is place for neighbors, not hate. You dare a Chinese woman. American woman, Samuel Chen corrected, moving to stand with his wife. Just like you. Only difference is we choose building over bitterness. One by one, others stood. Dr. Martinez, the Henleys, Captain Morrison, even some who'd been neutral. Choosing sides at last, Prudence and her companions found themselves vastly outnumbered. This isn't over, she repeated, but the threat rang hollow. They retreated, leaving behind poison but no power. Well, Clara said into the silence that followed. Who wants pie? The tension broke into nervous laughter, then real warmth as conversation resumed. But Jonas caught Clara's hand under the table. Feeling the tremor there, the confrontation had cost her. Later, as they rode home through the cooling evening, Clara finally spoke. She's right about one thing. It isn't over. There'll always be people like her, wanting the old ways back. Let them want. Jonas guided his horse closer to hers. Can't put a river back in its banks once it's changed course. Poetic for a horse trainer. You're rubbing off on me. Next I'll be reading those books you keep leaving around. Clara's laugh was music. Shakespeare on the range. What would your cavalry friends think? That I'm a lucky man who married up. They crested the rise that overlooked their ranch, and Clara reined in suddenly. Jonas followed her gaze and understood. The setting sun painted their land gold the expanded corral where young people learned to ride. The barn-raising neighbors had helped complete. The house that had become a haven for anyone needing shelter or hope. Sometimes I can't believe it's real, Clara said softly. That we built this. That we're free to build it. Believe it. Jonas moved his horse beside hers. Every sunrise, every free choice, every person who finds courage because you showed them how it's all real. Clara turned to him, and in her eyes he saw the journey complete. The banker's cold wife was gone forever, replaced by this fierce, compassionate woman who'd found her strength in the crucible of conflict. I need to tell you something, she said. Sarah Martinez, doctor. Martinez's wife, she confirmed it today. We're going to have a child. The world stopped. Jonas stared at her, joy and terror warring in his chest. A child, you're sure? Very sure. Clara's smile was tremulous. Are you happy? For answer, Jonas swept her off her horse and into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and protested. When he finally set her down, both were breathless. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, he said roughly. Scared too. What kind of world are we bringing a child into? A better one than we found, Clara said firmly. A world where girls can ride free and boys can be gentle, where strength isn't measured by cruelty and worth isn't determined by birth. The world we're building. Jonas. He kissed her then, pouring into it all the love and hope and promise of their shared future. When they broke apart, the sun had nearly set, but the light in Clara's eyes outshone any star. We should head home, she said. I promised Sarah Henley I'd help with lesson plans for next week. In a moment, Jonas kept his arms around her, memorizing this instant. I want to remember this, all of it, where we were when everything changed again. Everything's been changing since that morning you taught me to ride, Clara pointed out. Why stop now? Why indeed? He helped her mount again, protective now of her condition. Though you're taking no more risks, no more gunfights or midnight rides or... Jonas Hartley, If you think pregnancy is going to turn me into a delicate flower, you've forgotten who you married." But her tone was fond. "Though I might let you fuss. A little." They rode home through gathering darkness, planning a future neither could have imagined when they'd first met across Edward Morrison's desk. Behind them, Cold River prepared for the night, a town transforming, not without pain or resistance, but with hope. At the ranch, they found unexpected visitors. A wagon sat in the yard. Travel-worn family clustered around it. The man stepped forward nervously as Jonas and Clara dismounted. "Mr. Hartley, Mrs. Hartley, I'm Ben Watson. Heard tell you might have work for folks willing to learn." Jonas studied them, husband, wife, 3 children trying to look brave. Their clothes said hard times, but their eyes showed determination. "Know anything about horses?" Jonas asked. "No, sir, but I can learn. We can all learn. Just need a chance." Clara stepped forward. "Where are you from?" "Kansas way. Land dried up. Bank took the farm." Watson's jaw tightened. "Local banker said we were worthless. Wouldn't even look at restructuring the loan. But we heard Cold River was different. Heard there was a banker here who understood second chances." Clara's eyes misted. "There is, and yes, we have work. Jonas always needs help with the horses. And I could use assistance at the bank. Can any of you read?" "My Martha can." Watson indicated his wife. "Taught the children, too." "Then welcome to Cold River." Clara smiled at the children. "Are you hungry? We have stew, and I promise my biscuits have improved." As they ushered the family inside, Jonas caught Clara's hand. "You know we can't save everyone." "No, but we can save some, and they can save others. That's how rivers carve canyons. Jonas, one drop at a time." Inside, their home filled with voices, the Watson children marveling at indoor comforts. Martha Watson tearing up at Clara's kindness. Ben Watson straightening with new hope. Jonas watched Clara move among them, serving food, offering comfort, building community with every gesture. This was what they'd fought for. Not just their own freedom, but the chance to offer it to others. The banker's wife, who'd once moved through empty rooms like a ghost, now filled her home with life and purpose. Later, after the Watsons were settled in the barn loft, temporarily, Jonas and Clara sat on their porch. The stars wheeled overhead, infinite and eternal, while coyotes sang in the distance. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked suddenly. "The simple life you had before I complicated everything." Jonas pulled her closer. "Every morning I wake up next to you is worth 100 simple lives. Every person we help find their courage. Every chain we break. Every free choice we make, that's not complication. That's purpose. Even when women like Prudence Blackwood call us abominations." Especially then. He felt the child growing within her, the future taking shape. Because someday our son or daughter will ride these trails without anyone telling them what they can't do based on who they are. That's worth any amount of proper society's scorn. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then, "I used to dream of escape, just running away where no one knew me, starting fresh. But that would have been another kind of hiding. Wouldn't it? Real courage is standing where you are and changing things." "Is that what we're doing, changing things?" "One rescued family at a time, one fair loan, one riding lesson, one free choice at a time." She turned in his arms to face him. "Jonas, I want our child to know the whole story. Not just the pretty parts, but all of it. The cage I lived in, the fear we conquered, the price of freedom. They should know what we paid and why it was worth it." "They'll know," Jonas promised. "We'll teach them to ride young, to think free, to choose courage over complicity. And when they're old enough, we'll tell them about the banker's wife who pretended cold until a horse trainer pulled her close and taught her to burn." Clara finished. "Though maybe we'll clean up some of the details for young ears." They laughed together, the sound carrying across their land like a benediction. Inside, the Watson children slept safe for the first time in weeks. In town, the new Cold River continued its transformation. And somewhere in the turning of the earth, their child grew, heir to a legacy of chosen courage. The future stretched before them, vast as the Wyoming sky. There would be challenges, still people like Prudence who couldn't accept change, droughts and hardships that tested resolve. The everyday work of building something better. But Jonas and Clara would face it all together, no longer prisoner and sympathizer, but partners in the truest sense. As they finally went inside, Clara paused at the door. "Jonas, that morning at the bank, when you first saw me, what did you think?" He considered. "I thought you were the saddest beautiful woman I'd ever seen, like a hawk in a cage, forgetting it had wings. And now I know you were never a caged hawk." He kissed her gently. "You were an eagle all along. You just needed sky." She smiled, that transformative expression that still took his breath away. "Lucky for me, I found a man who knew about wild things and freedom." "Lucky for both of us," Jonas corrected, and led his wife inside. The stars continued their ancient dance above Cold River, witnessing the small miracles of daily courage. And in a house that had become a home, two people who'd found each other across impossible odds settled in for another night of freedom, another dawn of possibility, another day of building the world they wanted their child to inherit. The banker's wife had pretended cold until love taught her to burn. And in that burning, she'd lit a fire that would warm generations yet to come. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Clara and Jonas's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it. I'd love to hear where in the world you're listening from. Please leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts on their story. If you enjoyed this tale of courage and transformation, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories from the American frontier. Don't forget to like this video and hit that hype button to help more people discover these powerful stories of love and freedom in the Old West. Until next time, keep riding free.